Okay, Tuesday. So we had a day of factoring, and now we're going to stay on the same exact topic. We are still going to factor. But here, I'm going to give you the reasons why we factor. Now, this is going to be a little bit shorter lecture today because I want to give you as much time as I can to work on homework. All right, so hopefully, Austin, everyone is doing their homework in here. And Nick, I'm sure you got all of your homework done last night, so that's a good thing. And so let's talk a little bit about why we factor. And you're going to be factoring for as long as you take math classes. That's such an important part of algebra and of geometry and of calculus. Factoring is a big part of math. All right, so I'm going to do some of the same problems that I did yesterday, but with a little twist to it. We talked yesterday, and we started off our lesson by saying sometimes we factor with the greatest common factor, like 3x squared minus 9x. And we took out a 3x. And we did that, and we did that on your quiz the other day, on Friday. But what we also had in section 9.4, what happens when that equals 0? And that's the only thing we're going to do today. We're going to add a little bit of an element there, and we're going to have it equal to 0. Well, and as you guys know, either 3x equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. And then we can solve that. Let me just erase this here so we have a little bit more room. And so if I divide both sides by 3, x would equal 0. The other equation, when I add 3 to both sides, x could equal 3. And that's our two answers. Okay? Now for the next problem, when we first started factoring these trinomials, I had you do x squared plus 3x plus 2. And if you take good notes, and you can see that that's one of the examples, and we factored it, x and x. And if you remember, because both of these are positive, our signs are going to be positive here. And what two numbers multiplied together will give you 2, 2 and 1. And if I add those two together, 2 plus 1, I'm going to get 3 for that middle term. Here's what we're going to add today when that equals 0. Okay, so we're going to take one more step to where either x plus 2 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. The first one, I'm going to subtract 2 from each side, and so x would equal negative 2. In the second equation, I'm going to subtract 1 from each side, and x is equal to negative 1. So x is equal to negative 2, and x is equal to negative 1. So we just added a little bit, another element, something different. All right, and again, in your notes, what we did is I gave you a problem like x squared plus 8x plus 15. Now I'm going to make that equal to 0. So the first thing we do is factor, just like we did yesterday. We have x and x. And because they're both positive numbers up there, I'm going to have a positive here and a positive here. And then ask yourself what two numbers multiplied together will give you 15. Well, 5 and 3. So I'll put 5 and 3, because if I add 5 and 3, I'm going to get 8. I'm going to get that middle term, 8x. And that equals 0. So either x plus 5 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0. And I solve that by subtracting 5 from each side. And I'll get x equals -5. In the other equation, I'm going to subtract 3 from each side. And so x equals -3. And those are the two numbers. Remember from the other day, we said how many solutions were there. And we said there were 2 solutions. And those are our 2 solutions, -5 and -3. Okay, that's why we factor, so that we can find the zeros. It's called finding the zeros. So let's say we're going to factor this, a and a, and 5 and 2. We're going to make this equal to 0. And because I have a plus plus in my original problem, both are going to be positive. So either a plus 5 equals 0, or a plus 2 equals 0. And I can subtract 5 from each side. So you guys get the idea? A would equal -5. Over on this one, I'll subtract 2 from each side. And a would equal -2. That's my 2 solutions. That's the reason we factor, to find the zeros. All right. These were the other examples I gave you. And let's just do a couple. Let's do the one up here with the t's. Let's make this equal to 0. And if you recall from yesterday, we factored it t and t, of course. And then for 12, we picked 2 and 6. And the reason why is because if I add 2 and 6 together, I can get 8 in the middle there. And remember, if the last term is a positive, then my signs are going to be the same. It's either going to be a minus minus or a plus plus. But I look at that middle term and I see that it's a minus. So it's going to be minus minus. And we'll put 6 and 2. And you can use FOIL to see that that's a true statement. And I want to know what happens when that equals 0. So t minus 6 equals 0, or t minus 2 equals 0, and we're going to add 6 from on both sides. And t would equal 6. On the right equation, I'm going to add 2 to both sides. And t would equal 2. And that's my 2 solutions. Okay? One more. M squared plus m minus 20. Again, what happens when that equals 0? I think we discovered yesterday that 5 and 4 would work. Look at this last term. It's a negative. That means what? The signs are different. Because a negative times a positive will give me a -20. And what 2 numbers do I want to use? Well, I'm going to decide to use 5 and 4. If the signs are different, one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative, I've got to get a positive 1m. So I need a positive 5 minus 4. If I multiply those 2 together, I'd get -20. Right? -4 times positive 5. But if I added those 2 together, I will get a positive 1, like the middle term, 1m. And again, equals 0. M minus 4 equals 0. or m plus 5 equals 0. M would equal 4, adding 4 to both sides. Or over here, subtract 5 from each side, or m would equal negative 5. So one could equal a positive, one could equal a negative. Sometimes they're both positive, sometimes they're both negative. Okay? So I want to give you a couple more examples here, because you might see a problem that looks like this. X squared plus 3x equals 18. Well, that doesn't equal 0. So what do we have to do? Well, I have to make this equation equal to 0. Now look, it's real important that you guys, stay with me on these examples. Please pay attention. I know it's not the easiest listening to a voice here and watching the video, but do the best you can. Please pay attention. Take good notes. Mr. Johnson will be in to answer any questions you might have. Well, I want this equation to equal 0. So what I'm going to do, subtract 18 from each side. Because if I do that, 18 minus 18 is 0. Now let's see what I have over on the left side. X squared plus 3x minus 18 equals 0. Now it looks like the other problems we did, and I'm going to factor x and x. What two numbers multiplied together? Can I use 9 times 2? Well, not really, because 9 and 2, I can't get 3x out of 9 and 2. So what else? Well, maybe I could use 6 and 3. I know the signs will be different because I have a negative 18. So one's going to be a negative, one's going to be a positive. And I think 6 and 3 will do it. I need a positive 6 and a negative 3. Look, if I use FOIL, x times x is x squared. X times 6x is a positive 6x. Minus the 3x gives you 3x in the middle. And negative 3 times 6 is negative 18. And of course that equals 0. Now I solve those equations. Either x minus 3 equals 0, or x plus 6 equals 0. And some of you guys have got the hang of it already. We're going to add 3 to both sides. X is equal to 3. On the other side, I'm going to subtract 6. X equals negative 6. Like I said, sometimes both will be positive, sometimes both negative. Sometimes we're going to have one of each. All right, last one. I want you to look at on page 586. Austin, I know you brought your book today. So let's look on page 586. And I want you to look at problems 30 through 38. And let's read the directions. It says, finding the zeros of the function. Find the zeros of the polynomial function. And let me do one of your homework problems for you. Let's do problem number 30. It says f of x equals x squared plus 11x plus 18. Okay? The directions say find the zero. It's not as hard as what you might think. All we have to do is put in a 0 in place of f of x. That's all it means. And then we're going to factor x and x. Now look at my signs. They're both positive. That means I have a positive and a positive. And what two numbers multiplied together will give you 18. And I can get 11 out of those two numbers if I add them together. Well, it looks like 9 times 2 is 18. And 9 plus 2 is 11. So let's use 9 and 2. So either x plus 9 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0. And if I subtract 9 from each side on the first equation, x could equal negative 9. On the second equation, if I subtract 2 from each side, x would equal negative 2. And that's my two solutions. Okay? And Mr. Johnson will come in and he will help you and if you have any questions. For your homework, we are going to continue on with your homework. And Emily, if you would please make sure you write that on the assignment sheet again. I want you to do on page 586, we're going to do problems 20 through 41 all. And then in that worksheet that I gave you yesterday, the 9.5 practice worksheet B, let's do problems 10 through 30. And Carly, is that too many? It is? All right, then let's make that 10 through 30, and we'll just do the evens here. Okay? And enjoy your Tuesday.